Welcome to Speedrunner Reviews. In this series I'll be analysing and reviewing games using the mindset of speedrunning. This video will look at the game from three perspectives. First, the casual experience, which is how most people will first play the game. This will look like a condensed standard review discussing gameplay, graphics, music and replayability. Next we'll discuss the speedrunning experience, including all the interesting tech and how well the game holds up as a speed game. Finally, we'll look at what's possible with tool-assisted speedruns, showing what the game looks like when pushed to the theoretical limit. Today we're playing Lord of the Sword, which is an action RPG for the Sega Master System. This game came out in 1988 during the RPG craze, but plays more like an adventure exploration game than a grindy RPG. Let's start by talking about controls. This game looks like an RPG but plays a lot like a platformer. You can walk around with left and right, you can press the 2 button to use your sword, and you can press the 1 button to use an arrow. You can also duck by using down and duck with sword or duck with arrow. What you might have not seen yet is jump, and that's mapped to the up button on the controller. This can be really awkward to get used to at first, and a lot of old games will do this, so if you're playing on an emulator, I'd recommend binding up to a separate button on your controller, and then having another 2 buttons for sword and arrow. But if you're playing on the original hardware, you will get used to it eventually. It's just a bit of a learning curve. So this game plays with fighting enemies for the majority of the gameplay. You can see these ones here, we can sword them and get past them, and then you're going from town to town completing objectives. Now you'll notice pretty quickly our health is getting depleted by these enemies, so the health is the bar at the top there. And in fact, when your health gets too low you're going to die, and then you've only got so many continues before you have to start the game all over again. What a lot of people don't know though is when you go into the towns, if you go into a house it'll restore just a little bit of health, so if you keep talking to these people over and over again, then you'll see the health gets higher and higher until it's full. So that's a good strategy if you're playing this game. That being said, the combat is pretty intricate, so you've got just your standard enemies that you're going to be attacking here, and you can attack them with your sword to get past, try not to die like that, but then you've got some more intricate patterns to learn. So there's these bird enemies that will come to your height, you can just sword them, although it's really hard to time. Probably the easier way is to line up an arrow shot with them, and you'll get them pretty much every time, but even easier than that, they go to your height so you can jump, and you can manipulate where their height's going to be. So if I jump right as the bird comes down, it's going to go a bit higher, and you can get them to go so high that they go completely over the top of your head. When you see these birds coming and you're walking along the path, you can time your jumps so that they won't ever hit you. And it's some good strategies to learn to get through the maps quickly and not taking too much damage. The other part of getting through the maps quickly is you've got less time to take damage from enemies, and some enemies are easier to run away from than they are to fight. We've also got a few cool trick shots, like with the arrows. If you shoot an enemy with an arrow, the arrow will fall down underneath the enemy. If that happens to hit a second enemy, that enemy will take damage from the arrow as well. So if I shoot this green plant with the arrow, it'll most likely fall down and hit this Michelin Man looking dude. You've also got different enemies taking different amounts of damage. So this green plant will take 1 hit to kill, but this Groudon looking enemy takes 2 hits to kill. So part of this game is learning how much damage each enemy takes, and then how long you need to stick around to defeat the enemy. A big part of killing enemies is the stun lock, so if you sword them and then sword them again with the right timing, they won't be able to move really, and you'll get in both hits. Of course, if there's other enemies around, this can cause you issues because they'll be attacking you as you're trying to stun lock the enemy. But if you just mash the sword button, it won't work to stun lock it, you have to actually time the sword button to be appropriate. Mashing the sword button, they'll get in a bit of movement each time, and they'll eventually move enough to kill you. This concept extends out to bosses. So the first boss in this game is the tree boss, and you can pretty much just stun lock it until it's defeated. But you'll see it's moving a little bit in between each time I'm doing that, so that's not a sustainable strategy. But if you get your timing right like that, then it stun locks for the whole fight, and you don't really have to fight it properly at all. Some bosses in this game won't have that stun lock property, but a lot of bosses will. And there's still quite a bit of challenge to the bosses, because you're trying to stun lock them as much as possible, but you'll take damage when they break out of the stun lock. So it's about getting really used to that timing, and getting skilled with the bosses like that. So being an adventure game, this is pretty open-ended. You'll notice I'm in town now, and there's a path out to the left, which will take us to this area, and there's a different path out to the right, which takes us to a completely different area. They take you to different parts of the game, and you have to know where you're going to take the correct path. The townspeople will give you hints on where to go, as much as they can, but then you've got to do a lot of trial and error to figure out where you're going or follow a walkthrough. You do get a handy map if you press pause, but in all honesty, this map is pretty useless. I've tried to draw on top of the map here where you're supposed to go, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then you win. But that being said, there are lots of townspeople that you have to talk to before certain events will trigger. So this dude, for example, gives you the book. So if you want to do the book quest, then you have to have the book from this dude. Some people, when you talk to them, they'll open up certain paths. Now, this is where I have to be honest about this game. It can be very frustrating in some bits. So take this part, for example, where you're fighting the goblin boss. If you go into that arena, there's nothing there. So what you actually have to do is, in the town before that, you have to talk to this person to spawn the goblin boss. Alright, great. So we know that. Let's go back to the arena and... oh. Okay. Well, maybe. Let's talk to him a few times. Are there no brave men left? Same thing. Okay, cool. Ah, okay. Brave warrior. Rid us of the evil swamp spirits. Now that he's said that, of course, now the boss is there. So this is a bit of a frustrating bit about the game, and the way that you get around this is every time you get into any town, you really should talk to everyone probably about 8 times. So another example of this is in the town Linden, and this is where you go after you beat that boss that I was just showing. You can't go any further to the right, but if we look on the map screen, we're near that island on the top right, so we should be able to get to that castle. Okay, so we need to beat the goblin boss, which we've done, and then maybe we need to talk to the person in town. Okay, we'll talk to him and can't get to the right. Maybe we'll talk to him again and again, and now he's opened up the path. So this is a general trend with the game, and you'll have to sometimes talk to people with completely different towns unrelated to where you're going to find out where to go. So I would really recommend a walkthrough for this game to avoid yourself getting frustrated. So let's talk about what you do in the game. First thing you do is you go and talk to a tree. There it is. Next thing you do is you go to a completely different forest and fight a separate tree. After that, we got to go to the swamp and fight the goblin, which we talked about before. And then after that, we have to fight a pirate to save the princess. After this pirate, we fight a very difficult sequence of 5 duels in a row without healing. Then we go and fight Dark Suma and get a sword upgrade, so to speak. Then we have the last boss, Rago. And finally, we finish it all up by going to Castle Valen and getting our credits. Wonderful stuff. Now the credits are actually a little bit broken here when you get towards the end. The text overlaps itself. Very strange. And the end text is all messed up. It's not like that in the Japanese version, but in the English version here, it's pretty messed up. There's also a couple optional bosses. You can go to Mount Morgos and defeat the beast, then you burn the book in the lava, and you get a sword upgrade for doing this. Then you can also fight Medusa, but this is really just for fun. You don't need to do this at all to beat the game. So at the start of the game, it shows you this little script which tells you all of the things you need to do to beat the game. There it is, and those are the 3 tasks. So finding the Tree of Merrill is kind of correct, you do have to find that. Subdue the Goblin of the Valley. I'm not entirely sure which goblin that is. I think that is the swamp boss, you have to do that. But then destroy the Statue of Evil. That's talking about the Medusa statue, and that is not required at all. So if you read those 3 things that you need to do, you might actually find that you were going in the wrong spots to beat the game. You don't actually need to do those 3 things specifically. Now, of course, this wouldn't be an RPG without weapon upgrades. You can upgrade your bow and sword both twice, so they start off doing 1 damage each and can max out at doing 3 damage each. Here's where to get the 2 damage bow upgrade. Right after beating the goblin in the swamp, you talk to this dude again and he gives you the bow upgrade. If he doesn't, then you just need to talk to him a few times. Next bow upgrade is in the very last dungeon, and this one makes it do 3 damage. Then you've got your sword upgrade, you get 1 after Dark Suma. This one makes it go up to the 2 damage. And then your last one is a big side quest. You have to beat this beast in Mount Morgos while holding the book, burn the book, and then you go back to the wizard, who then gives you the sword upgrade. Now, the awkward thing about the upgrade system is once you have the 3 upgrade, if you collect the 2 upgrade, it will downgrade it to the 2. So you have to be really careful when you do this side quest with burning the book. If you want the 3 sword upgrade, if you're then going to fight Dark Suma after that, make sure you don't grab this sword, because this will downgrade you to a 2. And as you can see, depending on where he drops it, it can be pretty awkward to leave the room without grabbing it. So a big part of the fun in this game comes from the challenge. When you die, you'll be able to continue from where you left off if you hit continue on this screen. Conveniently, it puts the arrow on continue, so there's no risk of hitting start there. You hit continue and you'll go back to the map that you were in before. It doesn't say it anywhere in the game, but you actually only get 10 continues, including the one that you use to start the game. Speaking of which, if you start the game and you hit start, you'll go in a different spot than if you hit continue to start. It's just a bit weird. The Japanese version functions differently. In the Japanese version, when you hit continue, you'll go back to the last town, whereas in the English version, it's just whatever screen you were on when you died. There's also a weird glitch that you can do, where if you wait for the demo before you hit continue, it'll put you on the demo map after you hit continue, and we'll talk more about that in the speedrunning section. But the exciting part about this is, since you only get 10 continues, you have to be really careful about dying, and when you're about to get to a town and you're on that low bit of health and you want to heal up, it can be really tense trying to dodge the enemies. So it really forces you to use strategy with the enemies and also to plan out your routing through the game so that you only go to the important places. And if you're playing this on real hardware, you'll play the first part of the game a few times and get that little bit further each time, and it's really exciting to see what else the game has to offer and how far you can get. The other part that's exciting is these goblins. They steal your book item. If you look on the top right, I have it and then I don't. And if you kill them, you can get the book back. But it's about noticing that they've taken the book, and if they do take the book, well, you can't do that book burning task to get the sword upgrade. To round out the casual experience, let's talk about music and graphics. The game pretty much plays the same song for the entire thing, but at least the song's pretty good. I still have it stuck in my head even after hearing it for hours and hours upon playing it. It's got some really nice parallax scrolling in this section on the graphics, and generally the art style is drawn quite well. There are some weird parts of the graphics, like for example in this room with the tree tile that seems to be broken, but these forest graphics more than make up for it. I personally am really nostalgic for these forest graphics, and you can see that Landau goes behind and in front of trees in a really cool way. Growing up and taking holidays to Pine Forest always reminded me of these trees, and I obviously impressed upon this game at the same time because I always pair the two together. It's simple, but it's really nice, and I really like the black background, implying there's a lot more to this forest than what meets the eye. I also love this game for the sense of mystery that it brings. When I was a kid playing it, I had a shoebox full of Master System games, and this was one of them. You'd boot it up, you'd be in a town, and you wouldn't know whether to go left, right, up, or down. There was no internet back then, so you couldn't look up or walk through, and it was really fun exploring this game and figuring bits and pieces out. As a kid, I just walked around and died eventually, but then as I got a bit older, I figured out where the bosses were, and eventually figured out the entire game without looking at a walkthrough, although it did take me days and days, because I had to keep retrying because I kept dying. It's definitely worth a go today, and I would suggest doing it with a walkthrough. It can be frustrating at parts, but once you get past it, at its core, it's a really good solid adventure game. This game also taught me a lot about how games work in general. When I was about 10 or 11, I got into hacking games on the Mecha Master System emulator, and it was really just poking values in RAM and seeing what happened, but that developed into more of a ROM hacking side of things. Unfortunately, I couldn't find it for this video, but I did make an interesting hack of this game with my brother when we were about 10 years old, and it changed the character to blue instead of green, and it changed all of the text in the game to leet speak. So we replaced all the E's with 3's and so on. It's a bit cringy looking back at it now, but it did teach us some fundamentals about how games work under the hood. In terms of glitches, this game is pretty tame, apart from the stuff we'll see in the speedrun. Apart from this one thing in this fight, where the game can slow down a lot if you fire arrows at this dude. Although that doesn't stop some guides from claiming that this is a feature. So this glitch happens in this fight, and it actually carries across to the next fight if you do it as well. So let's move on to talking about the speedrun of this game. I hold the world record with a 33:11, but that's not really saying much given I'm the only one who's done a run. Please come and do a run and bop me off the leaderboard, I would love some competition here. So, what this run looks like is it's a lot of walking through these paths and managing enemies and trying not to take too much damage. So what you're looking to do is take damage to damage boost through enemies and go quickly, but then not take so much damage that you die, remembering that you only get 10 continues and that's it. So you'll learn which enemies deal not much damage and which enemies deal a lot of damage. You'll take damage on the enemies that don't deal too much so that you can damage boost through those stronger enemies. I've got the run on this segment here because this is probably the hardest part of the run, which is these 5 duels. You have to beat 5 bosses and there's not really much healing between those bosses. And then pretty much, if you die, you gotta start again. And leading up to this segment, you're on a route through the game and you have to take damage on that route to get through it quickly. So you're already coming into these 5 bosses on low health. So it really is about getting good at those enemy patterns, learning it, and trying not to take too much damage, but going quickly through the game. There's a lot of raw skill involved. So one of the big time savers in the speedrun is the demo glitch. There I've just finished the 5 duels and I've reset the game to the title screen. If I hit continue right now, I'd go back to those 5 duels. But if I wait for the demo to play, it's going to update the map to be the demo map, which is near the start of the game. So here we go, the demo plays, you hit continue and you're back near the start of the game. What's actually happened there is I've warped from the map all the way to number 5 on the top right there, down to that starting location in the bottom left. And that obviously saves heaps of time over the speedrun. Just a reminder that the Japanese version behaves differently. In Japanese version you'll warp back to the last town that you're in, so that means the demo glitch doesn't work. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. The Japanese saves time in some areas and loses time in others, but the English version's a bit quicker overall. The Japanese version would be pretty fast, although every time you reset you use up a continue, so that stacks up quickly and you run out of continues pretty quickly. The other glitch used in the speedrun is the pause glitch. Take note of that pause at the start there, that's put me back in the middle of the town, and you can do the same thing when leaving the town. If you pause right here, you'll end up in the middle of the next map, which is really fantastic because that skips a lot of it. You might also notice a lot of the enemies are in the wrong positions there because I've done that pause glitch. Now you can't normally pause on maps like this, so the way that's achieved is you press pause on the frame that you leave the town, it's a frame perfect trick, and then you'll get a pause on the map to get into the middle. The pause glitch doesn't work on map connecting to map because there was no town in the middle where you could pause. But pretty much every town, you can pause to get to the middle really quickly, and then you can pause on the frame you leave the screen to skip half of the next map. It's worth mentioning with the pause glitch, this is quite difficult since the pause button is on the console and you can often crash the game by bonking the cartridge. The pause glitch has a really big application in this last dungeon. If you pause when entering it, you can skip basically the entire dungeon there. And as you might have seen, it took me a couple of goes to get it, but luckily you can retry it pretty easily. So the pause glitch is really useful, but it is pretty hard to pull off. Now about the pause glitch and the reset demo glitch, they both rely on use of a pause and a reset button, and that can actually cause some issues when trying to run this game. So if you're looking to run on real hardware, you'll need hardware that has a pause and a reset button. If you're running on a flash cart, then quite often reset to game doesn't work, so that won't be an option for you. You'll have to run on the real cartridge. But with the real cartridge, quite often you don't get a very good pause button based on the adapters you can get, so then that's an issue. I could have run it on my Master System too, but that didn't have a reset button, and I could have run it on one of my PAL consoles, but NTSC is faster. Being an Australian speedrunner, I have to import a lot of my stuff, so it's hard to import something that's NTSC, has a pause button, and has a reset button, but I was able to for this run. Realistically, if you're looking at running this for that reason, emulator could be a good choice for you, but if you like the real hardware, it is still possible, you just have to find something with a good pause and reset button. So overall, I would really recommend this as a speed game. It's got a pretty high skill ceiling with some of the enemy patterns, and you can definitely save a lot more time with my world record here. This run in particular jumped down 3 whole minutes in one single run, so it's pretty far from optimized, although I did use a lot of my skills that I got from playing as a kid in it, so it's fairly decent as a world record. There are a few other factors, like you can choose whether to get a bow upgrade and do some more damage, but that's obviously slower to get it, so you might want to skip it like this run does and do less damage. So there are some factors there that you can play with, and there are some fun glitches like the pause glitch and the demo glitch. Another note with the demo glitch, if you don't have a reset button, then you can just die to trigger the game over cutscene in demo, but that's obviously a bit slower because you have to find enemies and die on them. So now let's look at how the tool-assisted speedrun plays differently to RTA. It's going to be more optimized, but it can't be that different, right? Oh. So this glitch it's like a boosting glitch. So what happens when you get hit by an enemy is you get some invincibility frames and you land on the ground. If you jump the frame that you land on the ground, what's going to happen is you're going to jump and keep those invincibility frames, but then also chain your speed forwards. So what Isotage is able to do is build up speed pretty much infinitely on any map and get through each map really quickly. The only reason why that has to stop happening is because the map ends. So that means every single map in the TAS looks like this, and the TAS is a lot quicker because of it. The other thing taking a big step up in TAS is the pause glitch. You'll notice on entering this next town, Isotage pauses and unpauses to get to the center, and he'll do the same upon leaving, which is a frame perfect trick. It'll put you in the center of the map, but that's kind of close to the left here, so it skips this entire screen. And Isotage pauses off pretty much every map to save that little bit of time here and there. You can realistically do that in RTA, but it's pretty hard given that it's a frame perfect trick. This has some pretty crazy optimizations, particularly around the boss fights. Take this boss for example, Isotage is able to jump chain the swords on him rather than using arrows for every single hit, which saves a lot of time. Isotage put a lot of effort into optimizing this TAS and was on and off with it for about 6 years. As a result, we get this highly optimized piece of work, and it's a really good showcase of what's possible in the game. It takes about 20 minutes overall compared to the current RTA World Record speedrun, and it's a really exciting watch, especially due to the speed of these jump chains. So that'll be it for this review. In my opinion, this game is an excellent hidden gem and definitely worth trying out. If you enjoyed this content, then a subscription is always appreciated, and I should have more coming out like it soon. Thanks for watching.